transition from singleness to relationship? How was that?
Okay. So I feel like I could relate a lot to Aaliyah because for me, I was single for my whole life. Like, this was my first relationship, but it was with a lot of intention. And what I mean by that is that I always told God from a young age that my first boyfriend was going to be my last boyfriend. And God was like, okay, you telling me this, I'm going to take you seriously. So anytime I got myself in a little situationship, God be like, nope, 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 you said. So when you were talking about the things where, like, in your singleness, you see what you need. That transition to getting into a relationship was very helpful because I'm like, okay, God, I feel like sometimes, this is one of my points too, where I talk about in my notes, where it's like, we sometimes think we know what we need. And it is when we go into the presence of God. It is when we go in that time of intimacy. It is when we go in that time of the secret place where God is like, I need to build my desires so that you can fulfill your purpose in your life. You need to go to my will. And that is when you start getting the, like, yeah, maybe I didn't want someone who's all about money. Maybe, I need this. I need stability. I need intentionality. I need consistency. I'm not going to go to the superficial things where it's like, he need to be 7'4". He need to be built. He need to, things like that. So I guess the question was the transition from here. So I guess with me transitioning into a relationship, I feel like I learned a lot from my singleness from that. I hope I answered the question. I feel like my brain is like, but
I can add to that the transitions never end. You go from single to courting each other, to engagement, to marriage, to becoming parents together, to becoming grandparents. So there's a season of transition. And when I was hearing Aaliyah, I was still seeing myself now in a 20-year marriage where I still am focusing on myself and my singleness as an individual, not singleness as I'm not married to someone, but as a person, as a woman, before I'm wife and mom and now grandma. I am still a woman. I'm still a child of God. And so I don't want to discourage anyone that if you can't get that down packed in your singleness, that work continues. It doesn't end because now you're together and you access God through the way you love your husband. You access God through the way you love your kids. It's just, it is a different level, as people are saying. It's not that you're missing out on it because it's not your time and it doesn't have to be. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you do meet God in the way you interact with others and your significant other and your spouse or your fiance. It's a different level of you learning how to love through God. And so my myth that was at the top of my list was initially when I first got married, because I was so young. I was 19.
Wow.
And again, because in our culture, you start families, you fall in love, okay, next step is marriage. You can figure out life, what's going to happen with life, you can figure that out later. And that's kind of like many of the people that I grew up with in my generation. There are many of us who were young married. We're all still married. So there's something to be said about marrying the wife of your youth, right? But I felt like initially, I remember saying to myself, love is not enough to be married. It is not enough. And then lately, God has been leading me. My husband and I are doing 31 devotionals for my spouse, and it kind of guides you through it. And something I've been reflecting on, if I am defining love through the lens of Paul, right? 1 Corinthians 13, love is patient, love is kind, love never boasts, love keeps no record of wrong. If I'm loving through the lens of God, it's enough.
Wow.
If I'm loving through the secular, it ministered to me too. And I had texted her and I'm like, I think this is what I'm going to go with, because this is what, like, my reflection. If I'm loving through the world, because my husband and I are going through a different season. He's building his business again, and I'm like, have my past traumas of other businesses, and it consumed his time. And we both were like, we just want love and peace. And I was like, do you mean 1 Corinthians love and peace? Because 1 Corinthians love it says love is patient. So we're going to have to be patient with each other if you're going to be busy. And I'm in a new season in my career, in a transition, right? So then I'm like, can you just hit like and verify that you read that 1 Corinthians 13? Because when you say all I want is love and peace, I'm thinking this kind of love, so it can be messy. The same way that is in your singlehood and learning to understand love. But that was a big one for me. And I'm like, okay, so if I'm loving through the way that Paul defines love, then love is enough. So that was a big one for me. I don't know if anybody wants to add to that. I got my other myths if you want to hear them.
No, you just like blew my mind.
Yeah, you did.
Because I have been telling myself that love is not enough.
That was me at your age. And I was married already with one child.
Wow.
So there's a lot that, and I'm gonna be 40 and 20 plus years of marriage, and even having to go back and reread, and I have it on my door, and I have a cuadro that says 1 Corinthians. I also have the fruit of the spirit. Like I have, like my whole house is holy, right? Just kidding. I just have things that I felt like I need reminders of. The fruit of the spirit is one of, and 1 Corinthians 13 is another. And it was something that God has been ministering to me, and it happened during our 21-day fast. And I'm like, oh. When I heard that, I'm like, okay. I was like, okay, so now I feel like I got to keep reading it, because there's a long list, beautiful things that teaches us. You know, in 1 Corinthians 13, it does not dishonor others. It's not self-seeking. It's not easily angered. I'm like, ooh, I got to work on that. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects. It always trusts. And trust is hard. And something that God spoke to me over the fast was, you don't trust me.
Wow.
And that broke my heart. And I'm like, oh, okay, so 1 Corinthians 13, and I'm like, it always trust. I need to love God better. I need to love my spouse better. That was, it kind of brought me to tears, because I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that about myself. And this is as an almost 40-year-old, 20 plus years of marriage. So that's why I say, you know, it feels like you want to do it all in your singleness, but there are seasons and it's going to shift, and you almost feel like you're resetting, but you have a solid foundation, so you're not. But in every season, there is a transition period. In every season, God is revealing himself a little bit more. And with dealing with your teenage child, or dealing with your husband or spouse that maybe going through a tough season, and depression and anxiety, you know, there's so much that God reveals to us through the people that we love, especially making sure that we love them through his kind of love. So it's been a lot of overwhelming revelations from God personally to me, that of course I would never, if someone else said, oh, el Señor me dice que tú no le confías, girl, bye, right? But if God tells me, then I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't hear that audible voice, but I felt the impression. So I know it's him that's telling me, and if you love me, then you trust me. And so there's a lot that that is revealed in marriage, and there's a lot that that how you grow as a person in marriage, and it's beautiful and it's heartbreaking, and you're broken and you're built up again, and you're a better version of yourself every time. So all through transitions, you know, I would just say God is the most consistent thing. I think that's what we heard in any part of our conversation, is God's role in our love life, right? In our loving ourselves, and you continue to love yourself. I continue to love myself as I love my spouse, love my kids.
I love that. I love that you said that there's a foundation that's set, because like you said, in every stage, God is setting a foundation. And when he's setting that foundation, he's setting you up for the next thing, you know, for the next way in which he's going to reveal himself to you. And it's crazy, because he also revealed the same thing to me, that I don't trust him. And that is something that I definitely want him to work with me on in my singleness, because I don't want to enter any other stage where I'm not trusting God, and then I'm not trusting my spouse. You know, I'm not trusting the person that he's placed before me and that he's gifted me with. So I just love that you mentioned the foundation thing, because God is always setting us up, you know, and he's always building us up regardless of the season that we're in.
Y hablando de confianza, algo que me viene a la mente es cuando llegamos a comenzar una relación o hablar con alguien, ¿verdad? En esa transición, hablando de transición, y confianza en Dios, ¿cómo es que, esta pregunta específicamente a
Transition.
¿cómo es que confiamos en Dios cuando estamos hablando con alguien pero no recibimos respuesta si esa es la persona correcta o no? Y hay una persona correcta. So, me gustaría que fueras más a ese tema de confiar en Dios cuando estás ya comenzando en esa transición de conversar con alguien.
Definitely. So this is one of my first myths. Me and my singleness, a little bit of my background is I grew up in a very Pentecostal church. The way that I was taught about relationships was, you know when you know, because God's gonna tell you from the get-go. And I'm like, okay, that wasn't necessarily my experience from the get-go. I feel like a myth that not even that, I think in the general Christian culture is that you are secured from God as soon as you start talking to them. And that wasn't necessarily my experience. I really had to be more prayerful. I had to be more mindful. It was a season of a lot of time. It was a lot of prayer, and it was a lot of observation. I remember in my singleness going and listening to the preaching by Mike Todd where it's like rip up the list. Yeah, relationship goals too. But he's talking about like ripping up the list, which is talking about what I was mentioned briefly before. But after I was prayerfully and mindfully, like I ripped up the list, as I'm going into the talking stage, I had to be especially mindful to like, what reminds me of God in this person. When you were saying also like in your singleness, you get to focus on what you feel like God is telling you that you need. This is the moment to observe in the talking stage, like, how am I seeing them? What are things that are pointing me to God? Honestly, it took a while. And I would see little green flags here and there, and I get so excited. I'd be like, yes, God, I think this is the one. You know, you get excited here and there, but it really took a lot of intentionality, and it took a lot of, since we're on the topic as well, trusting God. Yeah, that's all I can really say on it. But it was a tough season too. To like, I guess sometimes you feel like you're putting your faith in God, but you so badly like don't want to be disappointed. Because to be honest, I feel like sometimes it was hard for me, and this is something that I lived. I had a hard time telling God, even though you're a God that never fails, I need to be honest with you, I'm feeling disappointed, and God needed to heal that part of my life with him. He's like, I cannot give you something that I'm telling you and I promised you on if you're not giving me the disappointment over, because it could damage something that I want to bless you with. So
That's good.
Going into that, it was like, it's a season of a lot of trusting, a lot of prayerful, and I'm telling you, once you put the time in with God, God is going to give you revelation. Revelation is so important in the time of courtship, because God is going to be speaking to you about him. God is going to be affirming, confirming, denying. I'm telling you, I feel like a mistake that I see a lot is people telling me, God told me he's the person. I did something different. I was like, God, show me that they not the person. I'm telling you, that prayer was FedEx first class shipping so much faster. Because I'm telling you, when you pray God confirm, but you're not aligning yourself with the spirit, you're not being spirit led, anything could look like a confirmation to you. Your prayer was not specific enough. But if you tell God, show me that they not the person, something in you is going to be like, and you're going to know God is going to be speaking to you about it. So that's my little 2 cents on
the
it.
alignment is the piece.
Yes.
Aligning yourself with God, the Holy Spirit, aligning yourself with what you know to be his will and purpose, as much as you know, right? Because we don't know everything.
That's true.
But along with that, the alignment piece, one of mine, the trials and tribulations, the vetting process, right? The vetting process of relationship. I think everybody should have a vetting process of testing it out, of seeing them in their element, see them with their family, see them with their coworkers, see them, No, I mean, it's a vetting process. Like especially if you have that intimate relationship with God, like you're gonna want to protect that. I can totally see Aaliyah wanting to protect that. And so that vetting process is important, but I wanted to add, and I say but because trials and tribulations don't have to be the end. And so sometimes when we're vetting someone and we're looking for answers and things like that, and we see, oh, that might be a slight red flag, or even in marriage, you're already married and you're having trials and tribulations, that myth for me is for marriage, and it can be applied to transitions or singleness or courtship, is that trials and tribulations don't have to be the end unless they're a deal breaker. I think about abuse, I think about other things that you feel that get in the way that are irreparable, unless you just absolutely can't forgive, right? But for me, was trials and tribulations don't have to be the end. These moments of marriage can draw you closer to God and to each other. For some people, it's just an indicator that things are just not working out. This is why we see certain celebrities, I'm not going to say any names, on their sixth marriage, because they had a trial and tribulation. That's because they're not loving the way 1 Corinthians says to love, right? So it just repeats this vicious cycle, and then you find yourself in a dating roller coaster of, because I had a little trial and tribulation with him. Is it a deal breaker, or is it an opportunity for God to help you make them better or bless them? Whether it's marriage or not, I always say, how does that person bless me? And did I leave that experience blessed? And if I didn't, I'm not engaging anymore. Or was it meant for me to bless them? So in James, it says, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. And really, I bring that into marriage, right? My topic is marriage. And I want to encourage people who are listening, who are in a young marriage, especially those first 5 years are the hardest years, because you're learning to become one. That doesn't mean it's not meant to be. You're learning how to literally become one. Transition in your thinking, in your decision making, in your faith. You're going to have seasons where your faith is really strong and high, and his is down here, and then it shifts. It's hard to have that consistent alignment. I wish I could say it's perfect, but it isn't always perfect. And it could be on a day-to-day basis, hour by hour. Oh, I have so much faith, and I don't have that much faith for that. So I just want to encourage people who are married or are in a relationship who may be having trials and tribulations, as long as it's not a deal breaker, see where God is trying to reveal himself to you through it, versus walking away because it doesn't make me happy, which it's not no one's job to make you happy. That's a whole other conversation. But that's just something that came to mind when I'm thinking trials and tribulations, and the vetting process too. Because I know countless of people who maybe had a rough relationship and broke up like 10 times and they still got married, right? And for people who are more sensitive, like, yeah, one breakup is enough for me, I'm done. It all depends on how much you're willing to work at it. Yes. And it's the same with marriage. And that's I think my second point, so I can even get there. Like the idea of wedding bliss. And I bring it back to Ecclesiastes 4:9. It says, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their labor. The labor of marriage or relationship is that you two are going to work at it. And if there are things that are deal breakers, is there an option for rehabilitation? Is there an option for forgiveness? Is there an option for restoration? If it isn't, I understand. God understands. You just couldn't do it. Or is God pressing you to love that person a little different? And that's hard. And that's hard. And for some people, they just can't love that way. Or they're like, man, me and God, I love God, but I can't do this. And that's where decisions need to be made. But with trials and tribulations, whether it's a singleness or a transition season or you're courting each other, I just want people to keep an open mind about it.
Yes.
And not just cancel someone just because, I didn't like the way he talked to me. Well, did you tell him you didn't like the way he talked to you? Did you guys discuss it? Because you're going to get that with the next person. We all bring things into relationships that maybe we need to leave at the door or are transformed over time, and we make each other better. But I wouldn't say dismiss someone wholly just because this doesn't align with my list, which some people have a list, or Or is this something that I need to observe a little more?
Y regresando al punto de Alía, que cuando uno comienza, bueno, cuando uno está soltero, uno muchas veces tiene esa forma de pensar de que todo pues va a funcionar, ¿no? Porque si es la persona que Dios tiene para ti, va a funcionar y todo va a salir bien.
Not exactly.
Pero realmente cuando uno comienza una relación, simplemente va a magnificar y a engrandecer muchas cosas que uno adentro tiene que arreglar y que cambiar. Entonces esos momentos de tribulación simplemente nos van a hacer a nosotros darnos cuenta y analizarnos a nosotros mismos. Tengo que trabajar en esta área de mi vida. Tal vez no sea el problema de la persona, tal vez es tu problema. Que no estás moldeado correctamente para trabajar con ese tipo de situaciones. Entonces creo que un mito también es que todo va a ser
que si es de Dios, todo va a ser perfecto.
Exacto.
Que si es de Dios, no me va a hacer llorar. Que si es de Dios, no me va a ofender. And it's like you're two different people.
Yep.
Two different upbringings. You know, my husband, you know, I'm Puerto Rican, he's white. He didn't grow up in a Pentecostal church like I did. He became a Christian when we became friends. Very different worlds, and we've had to come together. Like I'll come in the house and he's making his white rice and listening to some salsa, and I'm like, okay, what did I walk into, right? Because he's learned to merge into my world, as well as I merge into his world and explore their menu, their diet, right? What the different dynamics of interracial marriage. That's a whole nother conversation. Interracial relationship, interfaith. That's another challenging place to be when you meet someone who's amazing, but maybe they're Baptist and you're Pentecostal, and maybe they're Lutheran and you're, you know, whatever your faith is. Interfaith relationship is also challenging. Doesn't mean it's not meant to be. It's just, where can we meet, and will I still honor God? And if that's a deal breaker for your interfaith, then that's maybe at the top of your list. But
So good.